Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in today's video, we're starting a new series in plasticity. So this is something that I get requests all the time to do more plasticity content. Now, unfortunately, I've just been really busy, and I've got a huge list of things to get through. But it's finally time to put together a new plasticity set of videos for beginner users mostly. I have had a lot of requests to do more advanced stuff, so things like XNERB surface-based series. I'm working on ideas for that. I don't have anything currently at the moment, but I am still trying to work that out. I will probably do that once the 26 version of Plasticity is released, so that way it has a little bit longer shelf life. However, basic modeling should be perfectly fine. It shouldn't really matter which version of Plasticity you have. There are some nuanced changes. The UI got a big update this year, and so older versions, 24 and back, look a bit different, but functionally they're still going to be very similar. So we're going to get started on this. It'll probably be 4 episodes, I think. And we're doing essentially what is the first or the original USS Enterprise from Star Trek. Now, full disclosure, I am not like a big Star Trek person. I remember watching Next Generation as a kid, but I am not really like a big sci-fi fan or person into that. So keep in mind that as we go through this, if you are a diehard Star Trek fan, I am probably going to get some stuff wrong, and I'm sorry. I will do my best, but basically we're just going to try to look at creating the geometry. I've also simplified this model, and you can search around online. You can find blueprints. There are lots of detailed images out there of all the variations of the USS Enterprise. But I chose the first generation one from the original series because I think that it has enough complexity that we have to, learn a couple of extra tools without being too complex, but we still have a nice final result, something that we can play around with. I am planning on passing this model on to Peter at Take Refuge 3D, and he is probably going to be doing a little bit of work with it. I don't know exactly what that means yet. Maybe animation, maybe rendering, maybe some more plasticity work. We'll just kind of still working that out at this time, but there will be some more done with this. Whether I do it or whether he does it, I don't know yet, but hopefully he does it because I think he's a lot better at that stuff than I am. All right, so another couple things we'll get out of the way and then we'll get started. I always forget to put this at the beginning of the videos, but we are an affiliate for Plasticity. If you're looking to buy, whether it's the indie or studio license, you can use the code LEAD10, and that'll save you 10% and it will help out the channel. Another disclaimer or thing I want to mention is in the description of this video, there are going to be a lot of links. I am going to put all the images as well as plasticity files at the beginning for the beginning of each video. They're all going to be on Patreon, but it's going to be set to a free post. And so you don't need to pay anything to download this data sets and follow along. What I have been using Patreon for is anytime somebody wants to donate, I will put a version of data sets that typically are in the description of the videos. I'll put a version there for like $3 if people want to chip in. But this is going to be free, so don't worry about that. I'll also put a couple other links in the video, but for right now, let's go ahead and just focus on this. So, who is this video series going to be for? This is going to be for a relatively new user that is new to plasticity, maybe not new to CAD in general, but new to plasticity, but has used it before. And when I say that is we're not going to go over every setting in preferences. We're not going to be walking through how to zoom or pan or rotate, but I will still call out all of the shortcuts that we use, and I will, for the most part, be clicking on tools rather than using shortcuts. Note that in reality, as you become more comfortable with plasticity, there are at the very least probably a dozen shortcuts that you will use. I will also put I'll try to include an additional document. There are plenty of links and information about shortcuts and plasticity. We've made a document before, and the official plasticity site has a document. But for right now, for new users, I generally try to work on where to find the tools, but you should 100% be comfortable with using the numpads to change your views from front and back. So 1 or Control and 1. 3 for right, Control and 3 for left, 7 for top, Control and 7 for bottom. So you should definitely get comfortable with those. Those are going to be important. And the numbers across the top of your keyboard, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or tab if you're not on any active command to get your selections all back selected. You can also click on them and hold shift down to add more, but just getting comfortable with those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as well as your numpads, those are going to go quite a long way. The other three that I think are really important are move, rotate, and scale. These are extremely helpful and will speed up your workflow immensely. So anytime you want to rotate, move, or scale something, you don't have to click it, then go down and pick this, and then grab something and move it around. You certainly can. It just takes a little bit more time. But if you just simply hit G and G on the keyboard, it'll lock it to your cursor and you can freely move it around. Or if we say G and Z, I can move just vertically up and down. And that really speeds up the workflow because it makes a whole lot of sense. And the last one that I will point out is F on the keyboard is search, which you can get to down here. And the three dots on the right-hand side, that is going to be your contextual tools. And so that is Shift and F, and then F is the search. So those two things, again, they can be found down here. But the big benefit of having it on a shortcut key is that you can have it wherever your cursor is and quickly go into search for a command. So that's going to save you a lot of time, where if you're modeling something, if you've got a big assembly and your cursor's like way up here, then having to come all the way down here seems kind of negligible. But honestly, the more you model, the more shortcuts that you can get familiar with for your common tools, things like the creation of lines or circles, or tools like trimming, or doing things like imprinting curves. If you can just remember a couple of those shortcuts, it will go a long way. All right, so to start this series off, we're already 7 minutes in, sorry about that. But to start this off, make sure you do go to the Patreon link and download everything. So you'll have Plasticity datasets for each video. You'll have the images, and I'll put whatever else I can think of, I'll put in there for that download. But again, it will be free, and you can download that for this series. What we're going to do, we're going to get started with a new file. We're going to make sure that we understand how to bring images in. And then we're going to start with the file that already has the images. And so first thing we're going to do is select the cube and delete it. If you don't like that cube every time you start, you can save a basically a new startup scene that doesn't have the cube. I just use the default every time and delete it. There are some times when I want the cube, but for the most part, I think most people probably delete it. And then we're going to hit the /, and that's going to zoom into our grid. Now, I'm using the metric unit system with millimeters as my units. My grid size is 250, lines every 25. I do this for a couple of reasons. Most of the time when I use Plasticity, it's for 3D printing. And 250 is a good standard size for most common desktop 3D printers these days. So I have a Bamboo P1S and I have a Creality K1 Max. Both are a little bit bigger than 250. And so I know that if I'm modeling something and it goes outside of this grid, then it's not going to fit in the printer. And so that's why I chose those numbers. If you're trying to model this so you can 3D print it, that can be a helpful thing to make sure that you keep the scale right. Now, if you're trying to go to scale and you search online for an actual blueprint image of the USS Enterprise, it's huge, right? I mean, hundreds of feet long. So you're not going to be modeling anything to scale and then scale it down. While you can do that, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So if you are designing it for 3D printing, I would just keep that in mind. All right, and so the first thing that we want to do is bring an image in. And when we bring an image in, we want to use import append. But what I will say first is generally you want to make sure that you are looking at the active construction plane that you want to put the image on. And the reason for this is because if you just use import append now, it's going to slap it on the top plane. So we're going to start with a right-hand view. So I'm going to use 3 on the numpad, go to import append, and then pick the USS Enterprise side view. It comes in tiny, and so we need to scale it up. Scale is S on the keyboard, but you can select it here. You can also use the keyboard shortcuts, which you'll find in the bottom right-hand side. S, uniform. If you hit S again, it'll let you basically lock it to the cursor. For this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it up 100 times, hit Tab, and Tab to all 3, even though we don't really need to scale the third one because it has 0 thickness, it's just an image. It does help. While we're on scale, we can actually switch to the move command. Instead of hitting OK, we can switch over to the move command and move the image. And this is where the benefit of understanding the shortcut keys comes in. For our purposes to get started, I'm going to hit OK. This is either click OK, hit enter or return, or right click will confirm if you're using the default Plasticity navigation. And then with the image still selected, we're going to use move. And then we need to pick a reference point. And so you can grab this little yellow box and that'll allow you to move in plane. Or you can hit G again, which will let you move in screen space relative to your view. And what I would say is try to pick a reference that you can match for the other views. So when we put the top-down image on this, for example, we would be able to use that center point of this revolve, this big section, as a portion or as a location where we can center that. If we use this little dish and antenna, it becomes a little trickier because you can see it from the side and the front, but you can't see it from the top because it's obscured here. And so then we kind of lose the ability to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick the bottom position of that and then right click and say OK. All right, the other thing that we really want to focus on is the opacity and the ability to have this in our scene without clicking on it. And so there's two things we're going to do. First thing we're going to do is click the lock icon in the outliner by left clicking. And that means that we no longer can select this image on screen. We have to select it in the outliner. And now that we have that, we're going to use the shortcut key M for material and then change the opacity. This is a PNG image with opacity. It's got a transparent background. And so as soon as we do that, you'll notice that that white or that grayish background goes away. This is important because now, if we right click to confirm that, now we just have this sort of ghosted image on our canvas area, and we don't have to worry about accidentally clicking it, so we can create lines and curves and we don't have to worry about them snapping to it. And so that's pretty helpful. And so now we've got our first image here. You can see scale-wise how big it is relative to that 250. So I scaled it up 100 times, and that 100 times is pretty big. Now, before I add the second image, and again, we're not going to do all three. I'm just going to do two to kind of show you. Before I do that, I'm going to go to my line tool. And with the line tool, I'm going to come to the back edge here, left click, and come to the front edge here and left click. And it looks like if we right click, that line or that curve is 630 millimeters long. In the bottom right hand side, you can see here. We could also add a measurement if you want to, but we're not going to keep the line, so I don't really care about it. But basically, we're looking at 630 millimeters. The reason that's important is because we're going to go to our top view, which is 7, or you can click on the Z on the view cube. We're going to go to import append. We're going to pick the top-down view, and then we're going to scale it up. So we'll select scale. We'll use the same 100 scale. And this happens all the time when we're dealing with images we find on the internet. Now, I know I created these images and I did not scale them because this is a common problem that we run into. And so the problem that we have is, one, it's facing the wrong direction. And two, well, there are three problems. Two, it's not centered. You can see it's slightly shifted off the X. And three, it's not the same scale. I can already see that the size of that main portion is smaller than that 630 millimeter line. So what we want to do is we're going to have to scale it, but first I'm going to get it into position, and then I'm going to scale it, and I'll have to move it again. But what I want to do is right click to accept, then I want to go to rotate, and we're going to rotate it basically in view here. And so what you'll notice is what happens is in the XYZ, that third one changes to 1, which is the one that we're changing the angle for. And I'm going to manually set it to 90 and hit enter. Then we're going to use move. I'm going to move it so the top of the disk is at the origin. Now it's hard to see, but if we zoom in, we no longer get that little widget that allows us to move it. And this is where you really need to use the shortcut key G. So if I click G, it will essentially lock it to the cursor, and it lets me get pretty close. This is just a reference, so it doesn't need to be perfect. And then we're going to right click to accept. Now we can see that 630 millimeter line is way bigger than the size of this image. So we're going to scale it up again. We're going to use the shortcut key S here to lock it to our cursor. And then we're just going to drag this out until it looks to be about the right size. It's hard to tell, but the end of the line is down here. So I'm going to hit S again, right click to accept, and then we'll use move. And what we want to do is recenter this and see how close we are. All right, so you can see we still have a little bit of scaling to go. So once again, scale. You can do it this way. I suggest getting comfortable with using S on the keyboard, then move, which is G on the keyboard. And again, hitting G twice will let you basically lock it to your cursor. Right click, and that looks pretty close. And so as we rotate these around, now they look to be roughly the same scale. If you actually are starting with a true blueprint of something, generally the scale is worked out for all the images. This was semi-intentional because I know that we have to deal with scaling images quite a lot. So I'm going to delete the line, select it and delete it, go to that second image, lock it, hit M for material, and then change the opacity down to 0.5. All right, so now we've got a top view and a side view. And this is the basic process that you go through anytime you're trying to bring in reference images. You can deal with the opacity if you want, or leave it full opacity. You can lock it if you want, but I find it much easier to lock it like that. There is one variation of this that I do want to mention because it can be helpful. And then we're going to move on to the actual file. All right, so I'm going to go to a top view, 7, /, so it zooms here. I'm going to go to my rectangle tool. There's a little arrow in the bottom right, so I'm going to hold down the left mouse button and go to a center rectangle. And I'm just going to drag this out. I'm going to rotate this around. I'm going to extrude this up, and then I'm going to delete the rectangle. So the reason I did this is because now I've got a reference cube, and this reference cube can be used to add images to it. So if you're modeling, let's say, a car, and you've got a left and a right and a front and a back and a top, then what you can do is select the face. You can hit spacebar or plane from selection over here on the right-hand side. We can go to import append. I'm going to go ahead and bring that right image in. I'm going to scale it, so use my scale tool and basically just pull this up. And I don't know why it rotated to that. It's not happy with me. All right, so I'm going to hit scale S on the keyboard twice. It's a bit easier. All right, and so now what we have, I'm going to get off of my temporary plane. Now we have the reference on that side. And the reason this can be helpful is because when we're modeling something like a car or a plane or a spaceship like this, sometimes having a box that is the full size of the object can really help you with the scale of everything and then setting up these reference images. If we put the top and bottom reference image on the same top plane, and sometimes that can be a little bit hard to deal with, so sometimes moving it above the thing you're modeling and then using the lock icon so you're not selecting it, that can be pretty helpful. All right, so all those basics out of the way, now let's get started by going to the file that already has the images in it. So one thing you'll notice is I have it facing left now instead of right. I've got a front view, I've got a side view, I've got a top view, and then I've just thrown 2 isometric views in here. These are all locked. The opacity has been reduced on all the ones that we need, and you can change the visibility by clicking on the eye icon, or if they're selected, you can hit H, which will hide them. And if we happen to be working on one object, you can hit the period key, which will isolate it, and then if you hit period again, it'll bring everything back. And so now that we've got all these references in here, we can get started modeling. So once again, I'm gonna hide the isometric views. We don't really need them right now. All we really need is the side view. So I'm gonna hide the front and the top and focus just my attention on the side. For this video, what we want to get done or accomplish is just this main disk portion of the ship. The rest of it is going to come in other videos. Excuse me. All right. So when we look at objects and we're trying to figure out how to model them, we need to decide basically the creation method. Now, in this case, this is not a perfect revolve because there's extra geometry on the back, and we'll talk about at the end of this video how to add that. But for the most part, if you can get the majority of your geometry in either a revolve or an extrude or a loft or a sweep or something like that, that's usually how you want to start your design and then add or remove from it from there. So usually when I look at a design, I look at the bulk of the geometry and how I can capture that. Now, obviously, if we did this with an extrude, it would be very tricky because we've got some gradual transitions here. We've got dome features on the top and the bottom. And so it doesn't really make sense to try to extrude this. We could probably extrude the disc portion of it. But in reality, a revolve makes the most amount of sense. And what we're going to find is that we're going to revolve the main body. We're going to revolve these pieces here, sort of the extra motors, the big center section down here. And then we'll start to remove geometry from them. The only thing that's really an extrude is going to be this main section here. And then some of the other little bits will also be extrudes. But for the most part, we're going to be creating revolves. And so we're going to start with the line tool. And the way I typically would approach this is I'm going to start from the top and go all the way to the bottom and then right click and accept. And so that is going to be the gauge of the size of the object. It's going to give me a axis that I can revolve this about if it wasn't centered on the y-axis. And then it gives me a place that I can create the rest of the geometry. For the domes on the top and the bottom, I'm going to use a center circle. I'm going to pick where it looks to be about the center and then drag that up. The one down on the bottom is larger, so I'm going to have to go further away and drag it down. And now I've got this portion, which would revolve into a dome, this portion, which would revolve into a dome. The stuff on the left isn't needed, but we'll do all the trimming in just a little bit. This main portion of the body is something that is not going to be able to be captured in the revolve, but everything else can be. And so we're going to use a couple of line tools and then a couple of splines or potentially bridge curve, and then we'll use those to finish off the shape. And so one thing that's going to be a little tricky, and I'm just now realizing this, is generally I like to work to the right, but this piece here that bumps out is not going to help us. So we're going to actually work to the left. So I'm going to essentially figure out where this section is. I'm going to come out horizontal, left click. I'm going to come down. I'm going to come out a little bit. And the main reason for this is because this will give me a planar face that I can use to create a new sketch. And that will be used to extrude the rest of this sort of domed geometry. And so that's kind of like an artificial step. And I have to imagine where this is going to go. So I'm going to assume it's probably going to come here and come out horizontal. I'm going to right click to accept. And then I want to add another line. So this section here from about there looks to be horizontal. I'm going to come back, looks to be about horizontal there. Right click to accept. And then we'll do another line and kind of repeat the process down here. So we're going to come out, up, over, and right click to accept. All right. So at this point, really what we need to do is connect these open areas. Now, we could do this manually, but it's probably easier to use something like bridge curve. And so if we select bridge curve and we select the end of that curve there and the end of this curve there, by default, it's going to use G2 continuity. And so G2 continuity is taking a look at the direction of curvature. In this case, we've got two straight lines, so they're both pointing essentially parallel to each other, and the radius of curvature. Now, because they're lines, they have no radius, it's 0. It's not really going to have a super huge impact. If we change them to G1, you will notice initially there's a slight shift because one of them is G2 and one of them is G1. But once they're both G1 or G2, they should be relatively close in this case because we are dealing with straight lines. I'm sorry, I don't know why I've got something in my throat. All right. And so in this case, G1, G2 probably isn't going to make much of a difference. Where you start to see a big impact in these settings is when you're dealing with curve inputs that are curved and made of complex shapes like splines. And the reason for that is because G1 is taking a look at the direction, G2 the direction and the radius at that intersection, And G3 is looking at the direction, the radius at the intersection, and also the rate of change. And what that means is if you've got something that's a decreasing radius, so a spline that is changing curvature and getting smaller as it intersects this curve, it will know that and it will carry that on. And so it can be helpful in complex scenarios. For our case, G1, G2 really doesn't matter. I'm going to right click and say OK. Now, if you were to try to do this without using the bridge curve tool, it gets pretty complicated. And what I would say is don't. But if you really want to, hold down the left mouse button on the spline and go to a control point spline. And then what I would say is what you want to do is come out tangent to the curve that you're dealing with here. And then you can start to build out your shape. Down here, what we're going to do is tap Shift, which is going to give us these projection lines. Come a little to the left, left click, and then click there, right click, and finish it off. And so you can build it out manually, and you can carry tangency by using these and making sure that this control point is essentially in that same tangent direction. However, this bridge curve is just so much easier to use in a case like this. And so you just kind of have to decide what makes sense for you. Now that we've got all of these built, I'm going to trim them. And so what we're going to do is if we go to this this little three-dot menu, again, it's also Shift and F on the keyboard. You can see here that we've got a cut, the C on the keyboard. But if we hit the F key and we start to type in trim, T-R-I, notice that this is a different tool. All right, so trim and untrim are typically looking at curves, and cut is looking at using a curve to cut a solid. And so with the trim tool, we typically want to find it or use the shortcut key T on the keyboard. The shortcut key is way easier to use. Another thing that you can do, and let's get rid of that side, and then I'm going to right click to accept. Another thing that you can do is most of the curve-based tools you'll find over here on the left-hand side. And so you can see here that we've got trim located right here, bridge curve right here, which we've already used, and then we've got the ability to split a curve or insert a point. So for example, if we've got a complex curve like this and we want to change the curvature in the middle, we can use that insert point to add another CV in there, and then we can select it and use the move command to move and change the shape. In this case, we don't want to do that, so I'm going to Control Z and undo that. But basically what I'm saying is we've got these curve tools over here that you can use. So we're going to use trim again. We're going to clean up this a little bit, and then we're going to right click to accept. At this point, what we want to do is note that we've got all of these curves inside of the curves in the outliner section. While you can use that and use this profile and turn it into a solid, if they all go together, if they all belong together, it is much easier to join them together. Now, the shortcut key for that is J, but once again, you can also come down in here and you can use the join tool and just find it in this list if you don't want to remember J. But what I found is certain shortcut keys have pretty meaningful shortcuts. So J for join, T for trim, C for cut. Once you get into things like mirror, Alt, and X, it's a bit harder to remember. But for our purposes, we're going to say J. Now, J or join is one of those tools that actually works not only on curves, but it also works for sheets or surfaces. And so if you can remember that and you can kind of use it in both of those cases, you only have to remember one shortcut in that case. All right, so now we've got this. I'm going to rotate it slightly because another common problem that I see all the time is people having trouble with things like revolves or patterns. And so when you select a profile, by default, based on the preferences that are set in Plasticity by default, it will automatically want to extrude that. Now, that's obviously not what we want to do. That's not going to give us the shape that we need. So I'm going to hit escape. With this profile selected, once again, going into that three-dot contextual menu, we're going to select revolve. There's not a default shortcut key for it. We're going to select revolve, and then what it's going to want is the axis of revolution. Because we created this curve here, what I'm going to do is just simply select the curve, but pay close attention to the icon next to the cursor. And so right now, you'll see it says XY or curve Z. you want to make sure that it doesn't change the orientation. So right now you can see it says center curve region Z. It's actually pointing in the positive X direction. And so you can select the endpoint here and the endpoint at the top and make the revolve, but just pay close attention to what the cursor is doing. A lot of times that'll give you a hint. Then we're going to right click and say OK. Now, I don't really need the curve anymore, but it might come in handy later. So I'm going to just hide it. And we can double click on it and rename it. And we're going to call this, let's just say, main revolve profile. So double click on it, rename it. And now if we ever need to go back to it, we can. All right, so you can see here that it looks like it matches the image pretty well. Maybe we're a little bit low here, but not a big deal. Now we just have to deal with this piece here. This piece we're really going to see from the top. And this is where it starts to get a little tricky, because if we bring the top image, it's actually below the part and we can't see it. And so a couple of things that we can do is we can move that image up above the ship. And so that's one option, is to select it, go to move, and just move it vertically above the ship. So that way we can see it whenever we need to. The other option is to start creating your curves and then simply hide the solid body until you need it. And so what we're going to do is we just moved it up and it's fine. We're going to select this face. So if you have trouble, you may need to zoom in or change your selection to just face selection, and then it won't try to grab those edges. Once we have that face selected, we'll do a plane from selection, which is also space bar on the keyboard. And now we're looking at it from the top. And so once we're looking at it from the top, we'll use our circle tool at basically the center of our revolve object. And I'm going to drag this out until it's roughly the size of that first one there. We're going to do a second circle, and it's probably a little too big. Basically, we want it to snap to this red axis. In this case, it's Y, even though it's showing up as pink because it's a projection. And we want to try to roughly match that outside. Now I'm going to hide the images. I don't need to see them. And I can actually hide the solid body. I don't need to see that either. And now what we want to do is connect these. And so when we connect them, we'll use the line tool. And one thing that we want to be careful with when we're doing this is not to snap to something like this intersection point, but instead come somewhere on the curve, left click, and then as we get onto the other circle, you'll notice that next to the cursor, it says tan. And what this is doing is it's adjusting the start and end point so that the curve we're creating is tangent on both sides. We'll left click, right click to accept, and then we'll repeat that again. And so once again, find the point where it says tan, and then now we've got basically a smooth transition from that smaller circle to the larger one. Once again, we want to trim. So we want to get rid of all the stuff on the inside here. Right click to accept. And then I'm going to box select everything here. And then we want to join them together. Notice when I do this, it doesn't give me the join option. And this is because my selection filter right now is set to faces. And so I didn't actually select any of those curves. I need to be on the edge selection before it'll let me join them together. And so just make sure that you pay close attention to your selection filters. And I tend to, as soon as I'm done tweaking the selection filter, I tend to go back to all, again, either tab or 5 on the keyboard. So now that we have this, we want to bring our solid back. It should be at the perfect height, and we just want to extrude this down. While we're extruding it, we have the ability to Boolean it, which basically means we can combine it, we can cut away, save an intersection with another body in the design. If we look at the options in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see union is Q on the keyboard. When we hit Q, we then need to select the target body, which is going to be this revolve. And you'll see it's turned blue. We'll right click and accept. And then we'll hide our curve just to make sure everything's okay. X to get off our temporary construction plane. And now we've created that revolve. You may notice that there are some weird lines that show up from time to time, especially when we have a revolve and then we add things like an extrude. To get rid of these, we can actually use a command called delete redundant topology. Now, if it's hard to remember that, generally what we want to do is select the body. We're going to hit F to find or come down to this little search command. And you can start to type in either delete or redundant and then just go through the list and then click hit enter. And you'll notice what it did is it removed that line as well as all these other lines that we had from the revolve. And that's just a nice way to clean up the design, because sometimes as we're modeling, we end up going through and creating a bunch of cuts or divisions or things like that on the model. And we want to just clean it up at the end, and we can do that. All right, the next thing that we want to do is we want to start to round this off so it looks more like the image did. And so when we have our objects or our selection filter set to all, basically all four of these are green, it requires us to select the object first and then the edge of interest. And when we select an edge, again, another default in Plasticity is that when an edge is selected, it automatically invokes the fillet or chamfer command. Now, chamfer, it just depends on which way you drag. So if I drag in, you can see it's doing a chamfer. If I drag out, it's doing a fillet. What we're going to do is drag it until it goes past the point where the vertical wall of that extrude disappear. And so it's rounded. You can see that back here, I haven't quite taken it far enough, but we can keep going. And then once we're there, we'll right click and accept it. And so we took that extrude without having to do any complex path and do a sweep for that shape or loft it or anything like that. We just made a basic shape, and then we rounded the corner off by doing a simple fillet. At this point, we could round off a lot of these other corners, but we're not going to just yet because there's a few other things that we want to do. So now that basically we've created that, there's one other thing. I'm going to go back to the top view. There's one other piece of this, and let's show the side view. This back section here on the original design is actually extended out a bit more. Now, I don't really recall if it's like a thruster or if there's a viewing deck or windows or whatever is there. But I do know that the top shape is smooth and it carries out to the back here. And so what we want to do before we start rounding off all the corners and sort of finishing off the shape is we want to extend that out. Now, there are a couple ways that we can do this. Some are easier than others, and the choice that you make is going to depend on the geometry that you're trying to create. The harder way to do this is probably with surfaces, and the easier way to do this is with imprint and just pulling the face out. And so if you want to go the route of doing it with surfaces, I'll give you just a little bit of a primer on how to do it. What we would do is typically start from the side. I'm going to start with a line tool. And what I want to do is figure out where that face is going to be. And so what I'll do is I'll find this edge, tap shift, which will give me this sort of projection line. And then I'll click, I'll come down to this bottom edge, tap shift, click, and then once I have this line, I want to extrude it out now. And again, with shortcut keys, E on the keyboard will let us extrude it. If you don't want to remember that, you can come over here, start to drag it out. Because we want everything to be symmetric about an origin or a plane whenever possible, we want to make sure that this goes the same distance in both directions. Now we can do this pretty easily in this command by just hitting tab. It's called lock distances, but basically what it does is it makes the distances in both directions the same. And so that way you only have to enter one value. Let's say 50 millimeters and enter and OK. And so now that we've got this, I'll hide the line. What we would need to do is either take these edges and pull them or extrude them or loft them into this shape, which can be pretty tricky because we don't have any references there, or build the shape out. So for example, if we wanted to extrude this, actually let's do this, select that profile and hit E to extrude, we can bring the shape out. And then what we could do is we could take these faces and we could rotate them. And so what we would want to do is select rotate, and then we could rotate the face like that, and then combine everything together. Now, if we were doing it with pure surfaces, I'm going to do Control Z to undo to get back to this. Then what we would need to do is imprint this, and this can be done a couple of ways. So for example, if I select this, hit spacebar, and then we'll create a center rectangle, and we just drag it out to about where we want it to go. What we could do is we could take this curve and imprint it. And so I'm going to search for that, start to type in IMP. You can see it's Shift and I, and then we can select the body we want to imprint it on. And so what ends up happening is now we've divided this up. We've got a bunch of extra lines which we need to clean up. But now we've divided this thing up, and we can get rid of this face, and then we can create surfaces to blend together. Like I said, in this case, it is quite a pain and a bunch of extra steps to do with surfacing. The easier way, because we already have to do things like imprint already, the easier way to do this, and I'm going to hide the sheet for now, is to do the imprint, just select this face and pull it out. And you can pull it out to wherever it goes. And then if we need to rotate these faces, for example, what we can do is select rotate. We can reset our pivot point, so V on the keyboard, and we can put it in this corner, and then we can rotate that face. I'm going to use a specific value. I'm going to say 30 degrees. And so that way I can repeat it on the other side. So come over here. We'll select this face, go to rotate. Again, V for the pivot point. There's nothing you can click for that. And then we'll go to 30 degrees, I think is what I did. And then we can just select and round the corners off. I'll hold down Shift and then kind of bring those out. We'll do the same thing over here, hold down Shift and round those out. And so now we were able to sort of extend that piece out of the back. I did it probably more than it actually should be, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what you can do. I don't need the sheet, so I'm going to delete it. I don't need that rectangle or that line, so I'm just going to select and delete those. I'm only going to keep curves that are the main geometry. And then again, we're going to select this and we're going to start to type in delete redundant topology, and then that'll just clean up all those extra cuts that we made. So the beauty about this is direct modeling. If we decide that we maybe took that face out too much, we can just pull it back in. And if we decided those fillets were too big, we can select them and adjust them. And we still have a lot of control over the model, but obviously that was much easier. We can rotate this face if we want to. There are going to be limitations to what you can do, but so for example, we say rotate V, I'll put this at the top, and we'll start to rotate this back. Look at it from the left. You can see that we're basically we're making it more vertical, and it's adjusting all the rest of that geometry. And so again, we're not kind of confined by all of the traditional CAD tools where we really need to think about planning out all these little steps. We can make geometry and start adjusting face angles, pulling things out or in, making fillets bigger or smaller. Even though we don't have the history other than undo and redo, we still have a lot of flexibility in making that happen. And so now that we've got pretty much the basic shape done, let's go ahead and just round off some corners and call this one good before we move on to the second episode. And so again, select the body. We're going to start to drag outward. This is going to be pretty small. I'm going to hold down Control, which will temporarily disable the preview and let me select another edge. And so that'll round that off. And then I'm just going to round all these basically all these little sections off. Now, if it's too big or too small, you can always just add more fillets or fewer. But for the purposes of our model, I'm just going to go ahead and just make them all the same. Just keep it clean. And there we go. So that is the basic shape. If we bring our side view back, that is the base shape or the starting point of our USS Enterprise. And so as you look at this and as you start to think mentally about the next step in the process, we are going to have this piece right here that's going to connect the two together or connect down to this main engine here. That is going to be an extrude. We're going to draw the profile from the side, extrude it. We're going to use a full round fillet, and then we'll draw the revolve profile down here, as well as add some additional detail using tools like offset, so we can create some recesses without having to put all of those extra pieces of that puzzle into the original sketch. And so we're going to play around with that in episode 2. Again, we will work on basically this piece here, which is going to be, I think there's like a lot of rooms and things, living quarters and stuff in the ship. And we'll do that sort of main section at the bottom. And then in the third episode, we'll move on to doing these additional boosters and supports. And then in the last episode, I think I'm going to do 4 episodes. We'll add some more detail. We'll go back and we'll add things like this dish on the front and little extra pieces. So we'll learn more about things like creating planes from a camera angle and moving bodies in 3D and so on. All right, so hopefully that helps get started in Plasticity. I am going to save this file and provide it as the starting file for the second episode in this series. So if you had any trouble at all with the first one, you have a starting point that you can use. I would strongly suggest that you get the first one done and move on with your own file. But I know that sometimes we run into problems. If there are any questions on this, obviously leave a comment. Once again, if you are looking to buy Plasticity, we are an affiliate. So lead 10 at checkout will save you 10%, and it does help out the channel. All right, so as always, thanks for watching. And we're going to move into episode 2, where we carry on modeling our USS Enterprise.